Today, more potential warning signs for Republicans in the midterms. A new poll from the Cook Political Report finds that Democrats are currently leading battleground districts by 6 points on a generic congressional ballot. And quote, if that advantage were to hold come November, any district Trump carried by 10 points or less could be in significant danger of flipping into Democratic hands.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. Something seismic is happening in American politics. Pollsters are just starting to catch up, and the legacy media is still underselling it. The Republican agenda, the cruelty, the corruption, the pointless war in Iran is being rejected loudly in places that were supposed to be safely read. We are watching a realignment in real time. Special elections that should have been formalities are becoming referendums. Districts that haven't seen a competitive race in a decade are suddenly on the board. And Ohio, where we were told the working class had moved on and wasn't coming back, has a flippable Senate seat and a flippable governor's race. This is what happens when a party mistakes a temper tantrum for a mandate, when you govern for the donor class while pretending to fight for the forgotten man, when your promises about bringing back manufacturing turn out to be lies, your tariffs blow up the economy, and your president's name appears in the Epstein files more than anyone else's. Eventually, voters notice. The question now is whether Democrats can capitalize, whether we can field candidates who show up, who understand what time it is, and who aren't afraid to call out Republican hypocrisy for what it is. Cliff Schechter has been making that case for longer than most. He's a progressive strategist, media entrepreneur, and founder of Blue Amp Media, one of the sharper political operations in the independent media space. He spent years consulting on competitive races. He knows Ohio cold, and he has a lot to say about what a winning Democratic coalition actually looks like right now. Here's our conversation. Cliff, thanks so much for joining me today. I can't believe as long as we've known each other, this is the first time I have had you on the show. Thanks for making time. Man, you have been following Trump and MAGA longer than most people through a political lens focused on Trump as the politician. Yeah. How would you assess Trump 2.0, a year and change into his second term with historically low poll ratings? You know what? Just riff. Where are things?
I was going to say, that is a great open-ended question. And thank you for having me on, Ken, especially as two Ohio guys and a big fan of yours. I told you when you ran for office back in the day, we one day we're going to have to actually get together and whatever your poison is, whether it's coffee or tequila or anything else, we'll figure it out. But
coffee or tequila.
Because, again, we're seeing numbers. Well, let's talk about it, a little bit from the perspective here. This state that we live in was almost like it was constructed for a candidate like Trump to steal it from the Democrats, with a strong working class base, lower level on average of college education than the average in the United States, higher level of or higher age on average, and a few of those things that benefit Trump, and a lot of jobs based on, on manufacturing. I mean, so many of these towns were across, especially the northern half of Ohio, but really all of Ohio. And so when you look at him and he's at -10 here, and he's at a point where he's actually, polls I've seen fallen well into the if it's, I'm trying to think if it's mid to low 40s of approval. And you have someone like Sherrod Brown who outperformed the top of the ticket by 8 points last time and only lost by 3. I mean, he's a unicorn. He's an incredible candidate, and doing terrifically. And then as if they wanted to rub it in. And I feel like this is a microcosm of what they're doing around the country. They're like, let's have Vivek Ramaswamy run and make it somehow find a way to make it why is the word not coming to me? But make it so that we don't have some no-name Republican. We've got this guy that is tied into Trump who did a pump and dump scheme with his mommy, the doctor, signing off on his Alzheimer drug. It turned out to be a bust, and everybody lost their money. And that's a metaphor for these guys overall, which is they had these economic promises and they were all lies. They all were either lies, or maybe Trump is dumb enough to really believe some of this stuff. It doesn't really matter in the end. It's that none of it made sense to anybody who understood economics. Regular folks are hurting. He's all over the Epstein files. And I'm saying all this because I want to get to, I will get to a point with all of this overall, but he's all over the Epstein files, all of these billionaire, and not somebody who did great in movies like Steven Spielberg and made $1 billion. I'm talking about the people that set out to take over the world, the proligarchs, these fascist tech titans are all behind him, are all, in for removing democracy. People, I think, get it now. They've seen some of the behavior of what I call the billionaire predator class, the Epstein class that surrounds him. And they realize that for every corrupt action by one of those guys, it's costing them. When Doge goes in and cuts SNAP payments so your kids can't eat, but then you see Elon Musk getting these ridiculous no bid contracts for his rockets, because of Iran and other things, they're outraged. And so I've never seen, I had Joe Trippi on my show last week, who's been in this business for a long time, Mike Madrid, who's been in this business, and we're all saying the same thing, which is we've never seen numbers like this. 27% approval among independents. Nixon was at 35 during Watergate. Trump was at 36. Bush the second was at 36 at the lowest point of Iraq. You're seeing those kinds of numbers. Mike Madrid said that he never had seen the Latinos ditch somebody so quickly in terms of the numbers he saw. He couldn't believe he was seeing. We're not talking about 56% of the Latino population overall. We're talking about 56% of those who actually voted for Trump have now turned against him.
I did an interview this morning as a guest. I'm finding myself doing a lot more of those lately, and was asked,
we got you on, which was awesome.
That's true. How do you explain the spell that Trump cast over so much of Ohio? How do you explain the attraction to the spectacle? And I think it's really kind of simple. He was entertaining.
Yep.
And in peacetime, and I'm going to put peacetime in air quotes, but in peacetime, that sort of gladiatorial approach to politics is entertaining, turning the American political scene into a coliseum, being entertaining. He had a multi-decade-long audition, bread and circus. He had a multi-decade-long audition for the role, and he auditioned by being entertaining. And in peacetime, that was enough for a lot of Ohioans. It was fun to watch Trump. It was fun to stick it to the libs, right? In wartime, proverbially speaking, we're actually now literally in a war, but when things get tough, when prices go up, when you're worried about your kids being drafted and being sent to a war that no one has explained to you, then it's not fun anymore. It's not funny anymore. And the gladiatorial approach to politics suddenly has costs, and they are imposed on you. I mean, farmers are going bankrupt in record numbers across Ohio.
I feel like they got hit with a triple dip, tariffs,
highest suicide
importing
rate
workers. And now this with the Strait of Hormuz and the 33% of fertilizer. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then the tariffs and the impact on not just the price of things, but manufacturing. It turns out the economy is indeed global. And I would love your perspective as a fellow Ohioan. I guess there's a couple of places I could take this, but let's start with maybe a little grace. Joe Walsh talks about this all the time, and I
have a Thursday night show where we sip tequila and talk about it. No, but I mean, but I only cite that as, I'm not trying to even promote it. It's he and I, who called each other names on Twitter 15 years ago, found ways to sit down and have these conversations, and we still disagree on some issues. It's just about the Constitution and things we care about. So some grace is a good thing for all. We all could use it.
And it's also strategic because there are some folks that I will find it hard to ever forgive because they knew better. I think a lot of Trump voters didn't know better. They just weren't. And we need to acknowledge this as podcasters. Yeah. We swim in politics. Most people don't. Most people have real jobs. Most people don't think about the Strait of Hormuz every day like I do and the insanity of this war with Iran. And so it's folks like that who I think we can afford maybe a little extra dose of grace.
We created these conditions. If they're voting in Finland or they're voting in France, I didn't mean to pick all countries that start with F, so we can go with something else. But like, if they're not worried that the outcome is of the election, they're not. Or let's back up. They're not worried they're going to come home that day and find out, like I did a couple weeks ago, that I had to have an operation on my arm. I had to have a procedure, and I was told it was going to cost me $900, and then I got a $6,400 bill. A lot of people, that's it. Right. What I saw some stat, 50-60% of Americans, they got hit with $1,000 that they didn't expect a bill. They would be, that's it. So
that's a busted transmission. That's one pothole, and you're suddenly in dire straits economically. That's a lot of American families today. My mom is the reason I am who I am, the kind of person who shows up for everybody. And the photos I love most of her aren't the staged ones. They're the candid shots she never knew I took. Her at the dining room table mid-laugh, or holding a grandkid like she'd been waiting her whole life for that exact moment. The little stuff you don't think to frame until you realize how much you'd give to see it again. I sent my mom an Aura photo frame, and it might be the best gift we've ever gotten her. It sits on the counter and just plays our life back to her. Every day, a different memory. And here's the thing. With Aura, you get free unlimited storage. Add as many photos and videos as you want. You can preload photos before it ships. Keep adding from anywhere, anytime. You can personalize your gift. Add a message before it arrives. Every frame comes in a premium gift box with no price tag. And it was the #1 app in the App Store on Christmas Day in 2025. Make Mother's Day special with Aura frames. Named #1 by Wirecutter, you can save on the gifts moms love by visiting auraframes.com. For a limited time, listeners can get $25 off their best-selling Carver mat frame with code KEN. That's auraframes.com, promo code KEN. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Hey everyone, it's Ken. Super quick break to remind you that I've got a Substack page. Please consider subscribing for exclusive content and bi-weekly Substack lives. And for the next month, every paid subscription goes towards my upcoming reporting trip to Ukraine. Thanks for the support. The link is below. Slava Ukraine.
I'm not some Elon Musk or something. I just am lucky that I'm able to afford that, take that hit. It hurts. But I also, I call myself this sometimes on our show. I'm an asshole for freedom, as I like to say, which means I will be an asshole and fight if that means I'm being nasty and fighting for freedom, if I'm arguing with monopolists who are trying to screw me over. And so I've fought them, and I got that thing knocked down by about 60%, although it still was ridiculous. And my point is, a lot of Americans can't pay attention to politics every day because they're worried about that happening, a healthcare bill. They're worried about the fact that some idiot like Elon Musk, who understands nothing, might disappear their SNAP payment, and now their kid's not eating at school. They can't afford childcare. They can't afford, and a lot of these folks we're now talking about are not even people. They're not, people think themselves, oh, they must be impoverished, or they must be, working class. At this point, middle class and upper middle class people are having trouble affording these things. So we've created a situation where it's hard for people to take the time to think about something like politics because they're trying to just get by. And not to be a conspiracy theorist, I think obviously Republicans love it that way because the less people think, the better they do.
Give us your prognosis for Ohio and how that plays out here, because we are in the rarest of circumstances now where we're actually looking at a flippable Senate seat, a flippable governor's race. We used to say that as Ohio goes, so goes the nation. We didn't really mean it for the last decade, but it might be true again. Like, what the heck is going on here?
When Trump went and he lied and he said he was going to bring back jobs, what was the name of the plant up in Youngstown? And when he talked about all this anti-China rhetoric, meanwhile, the guy made all his products there. He had a bank account there. We found out after he lost in 2020. His daughter got 30-something patents from them. Jared Kushner was pitching them, the specialized visas. And the number of connections, Mike Pompeo had stock, we found out, in a Chinese tech company. I mean, the number of connections for all of their fake, hemming and hawing about China. And that matters in this state a lot. And so I think, Trump came in and he made those kinds of promises a number of times. And we as Democrats are not offering the opposite. We're offering tepid half measures. Not Sherrod Brown, who is one of the best politicians I've ever seen. It's why he overperformed and almost won here. But what they did is, once they took power, they consolidated. They gerrymandered, which leads to us losing a few points each election. The Secretary of State, they purge voters in a ridiculous way, which leads us to losing a couple points every election. I mean, the truth of the matter is that maybe we've moved 2-3 points in a Republican direction. I don't believe we've moved 8. It's just they've done here what they've done in Florida, what they've done in Texas, and places like that is they've cheated. So they've lost kind of the way Orban did well, we stand up for God and, this and that. They lost that whole thing with Epstein. They've lost the economic argument because their plans have all failed and people are actually doing worse. And people have caught on. And I wish we'd come forward with more forward-thinking policies and been more authentic and talked about, if they want to talk about social issues. To me, it's not about throwing anybody under the bus. It's about defending everyone, talking about the Constitution and the rights it gives all of us, the fact that we're all equal, that we all matter, and then moving on to the issues that are economic issues, and and you call them democracy issues, whatever you want to call them, that matter to people because, again, you're trying to put together the largest coalition.
Well, I think the key in all of that is delivering that electoral verdict in November that is so resounding that it cannot be challenged. It's one thing for the president to call a Secretary of State and say, find me 11,000 votes. He can't call a Secretary of State and say, find me 111,000 votes. So that's what we need to deliver come November. Cliff, we're going to have to leave it there. Where can people find you online?
So the two best spots are at Substack, which is probably home base. We're at Blue Amp Media is the name of the company that I started. David Schechter, who used to be on MSNBC, is there with us. Ellie Leonard, who writes a lot about the Epstein files and those stories. We've got a great crew. And it's really easy, just blueamp.co. So no M on the end. We're too cool for the M is what I like to say. I'm just making up stupid. So blueamp.co is one of them. And then we're in the process of fixing this because my personal YouTube is becoming the Blue Amp one, but Blue Amp Media you can find on YouTube too. And that's a little tougher. Right now it's at Cliffs_edge. But if you look for Blue Amp Media on YouTube, you'll find it there too. And those are our two best spots.
We'll put links in the show notes. Thanks, Cliff. Let's do this more often.
Absolutely, Ken. Thanks for having me on, man.
You got it.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.